The knife pressed against Garrick's throat was silver, which meant whoever held it was either very brave or catastrophically stupid. "You're going to lift the conscription law," a voice hissed in his ear, feminine and shaking with either fear or fury, "or I'm going to find out if alpha kings bleed the same color as everyone else." Garrick didn't move. Didn't even blink. Around him, the winter garden had gone deathly silent, his guards frozen in a tableau of horror and indecision. One wrong move and their king would have a second smile carved beneath the first. "Well," Garrick said conversationally, as if discussing the weather, "this is certainly one way to request an audience." The knife pressed deeper. A thin line of warmth trickled down his neck, so yes, apparently alpha kings did bleed red. "Good to know. I'm not joking. Neither am I." He could smell her now, even through the silver burning against his skin. Cinnamon and snow and something wild underneath. Something that made his wolf, that cold bastard who'd been silent for weeks, suddenly snap to attention. "Tell me, are you always this direct, or did you skip the proper channels section of assassination training?" "There are no proper channels for omegas," she snarled. "Only rejection and conscription and early graves." So that's what this was about." "Eloan," he said quietly, and felt her flinch at her name. "Put down the knife. So you can have me executed? So we can have a conversation that doesn't end with Marcus over there having a complete nervous breakdown." He tilted his head slightly, carefully, given the silver still kissing his jugular. "Look at him. I think he's actually crying." Despite herself, his would-be assassin glanced toward his beta, who did indeed look on the verge of a catastrophic emotional event. "He's very sensitive," Garrick continued. "Doesn't handle workplace violence well. It's his biggest weakness, really. That and his tendency to eat all the good pastries before anyone else gets to them." "You're insane," she breathed. "I'm patient," he corrected. "There's a difference. Now, you have approximately 30 seconds before my guards remember they're trained warriors and not decorative statues. You can either kill me, which, admittedly, would solve several of my problems, or you can lower the knife and tell me what's actually bothering you. Your choice." For a long moment, nothing moved except the snow drifting down between them, soft and relentless. Then the pressure against his throat eased. Garrick turned slowly, and finally got a good look at the woman who'd held a knife to his throat with such admirably poor judgment. White blonde hair, frost blue eyes, and a face that would have been beautiful if it wasn't currently twisted with desperate rage. She wore one of the simple dresses provided to castle residents, but she held that silver knife like she knew exactly where to put it for maximum damage. This, Garrick realized with something between admiration and resignation, was going to be a problem. "Now then," he said, ignoring the blood on his collar and Marcus's strangled wheezing. "Let's discuss this conscription law you're so concerned about." But first, he held out his hand. "The knife, if you please. Silver gives me hives." 6 weeks earlier, the night Garrick Fenler became the Alpha King was the same night he learned that power always demands payment in blood. He was 23, carved from mountain stone and winter fury, when he claimed the throne over his father's cooling corpse. The old king had been weak, they said, too soft, too human. Garrick would be different. Garrick would be strong. And for exactly 3 months he was. He united the fractured packs, crushed the rebellion in the south, and made the kingdom tremble at the mere whisper of his name. Then he met Celine. She was a beta's daughter with eyes like honey and a laugh that could make even the stars lean closer to listen. Garrick, who had sworn his heart belonged only to his kingdom, fell like a damn avalanche, swift, destructive, and utterly without warning. For 6 weeks, he was unbearably, pathetically happy. He wrote her terrible poetry. He smiled at breakfast. His advisors began to worry he'd gone soft. They should have worried about something else entirely. The blood moon rose on the autumn equinox, fat and red as a fresh wound. Garrick found Celine in the garden, her skin already turning cold, her lips blue as forget-me-nots. The royal physician called it heart failure. The old crone who served in the kitchens called it exactly what it was, a curse, ancient and absolute, woven into the Fenler bloodline by a witch scorned 3 generations past. Any woman the Alpha King loves will die under the blood moon. Garrick buried Selene beneath the silver oak and swore, on his crown, on his honor, on the goddess herself, that he would never love again. Love was a luxury. Love was a weapon. Love was a bullet he refused to put in the chamber. And for 7 years, he kept that vow. He was a king, not a man. He was ice and iron and unyielding law. He took lovers, yes, wolves knew their needs, but he never let them close enough to warm the permafrost around his heart. He became exactly what the kingdom needed, terrifying, efficient, and utterly alone. His advisors praised his dedication. His enemies feared his ruthlessness. His people respected him from a very safe distance. And then, on a winter morning that smelled like pine and approaching snow, Aloan Frostclaw collapsed at the base of his throne. She literally collapsed. There was no dignity in it whatsoever. One moment the throne room doors crashed open. The next moment a half-frozen, blood-streaked Omega was face down on his marble floor, creating what would undoubtedly be a memorable stain. "Well," Garrick said into the stunned silence. "That's new." His beta, Marcus, was already moving forward, his nose wrinkling. "She's been rejected. Recently. The scent. I can smell it." And goddess, he could. Rejection scarred an Omega in ways that went deeper than flesh, and this one reeked of it, the acrid, desperate stench of a bond torn rather than broken cleanly. It made his wolf snarl with instinctive rage. Whoever had done this hadn't just rejected her. They'd destroyed her. "She's also," Marcus added helpfully, crouching beside the crumpled form, half dead. "Malnutrition, exposure, infected wounds. Should I call the physician or a gravedigger?" "How delightfully optimistic of you." Garrick descended from his throne and immediately regretted it. Up close, she was worse. Her clothes were rags, her hair a matted tangle of white blonde that had probably been beautiful before she'd apparently been dragged through every circle of hell. But her face, even half dead, there was something defiant in the set of her jaw. Something that refused to apologize for having the audacity to survive. His wolf, which had been a cold, silent thing for 7 years, suddenly sat up and paid attention. "Absolutely not," Garrick told it firmly. "Take her to the East Wing," he heard himself say. "Get her cleaned up, fed, healed. When she's conscious, I want to know who rejected her and why she's here." Marcus raised an eyebrow, a gesture that would have gotten anyone else banished. "You're taking in strays now?" "I'm taking in information." Someone rejected an Omega badly enough that she dragged herself across goddess knows how many territories to reach the capital. That's either very desperate or very calculated, and I want to know which. He turned back toward his throne, dismissing the matter entirely. "Besides, she's half dead. She'll probably do us all a favor and finish the job by morning." She didn't. In fact, Aloan Frostclaw proved to be aggressively, inconveniently alive. Within 3 days, she was sitting up. Within a week, she was arguing with the physician about his bedside manner. Within 2 weeks, she'd somehow convinced the kitchen staff to let her help with the baking, and the entire East Wing smelled like cinnamon and rebellion. Garrick told himself he was just keeping an eye on a potential threat. He told himself that's why he found excuses to walk past the East Wing. He told himself that's why he'd memorized which window was hers, why he noticed when the lights stayed on too late, why his wolf paced restlessly whenever that goddamned cinnamon smell drifted through the castle. He told himself a lot of lies that winter. The first time Garrick actually spoke to Aloan after her dramatic entrance, she was elbow-deep in bread dough and arguing with his head cook about proper kneading technique. "You're overworking it," she was saying, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who'd been raised in a kitchen and knew exactly what she was talking about. "You want it smooth, not tortured. And who are you to tell me how to make bread?" Cook Meredith demanded, hands on her substantial hips. "I've been baking since before you were a gleam in your mother's eye. Then you should know better." Aloan's hands moved with practiced efficiency, shaping the dough into something that would rise properly instead of turning into an edible brick. "My mother ran the best bakery in Frostclaw territory. I know bread." "Ran?" Garrick asked from the doorway, and had the satisfaction of watching Aloan jump approximately 3 feet in the air. She whirled, flour dusting her cheeks like snow, and for a moment something raw and hunted flickered across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by a carefully neutral expression that didn't quite hide the defiance underneath. "Your Majesty." She didn't bow. "Interesting. I didn't hear you come in. I'm stealthy like that. It's very inconvenient for people trying to poison my food." He nodded to Meredith, who was watching this interaction with the fascinated horror of someone witnessing a potential execution. "Leave us." "Your Majesty, I don't think." "Leave us, Meredith. I promise not to let the Omega murder me in your kitchen. It would ruin the ambience." When they were alone, Garrick pulled out a stool and sat, watching as Aloan very carefully returned to her bread dough. Her hands, he noticed, were shaking slightly. "You said your mother ran a bakery," he said conversationally. "Past tense. She's dead. Flat. Final. Fire. 3 months ago. I'm sorry. Are you?" Those frost-blue eyes met his, cold and assessing. "You didn't know her. You don't know me. Royal sympathy is just another kind of currency, isn't it?" Garrick felt his mouth curve despite himself. Most people either cowered before him or fawned shamelessly. This half-dead Omega did neither. "You're right," he said. "I didn't know her. But I know what it's like to bury someone and realize the world just keeps turning anyway. So yes, I'm sorry. You can believe it or not, that's your choice." Aloan stared at him for a long moment, then returned to her dough with more force than strictly necessary. "Why are you here? Would you believe I was craving fresh bread?" "No." "Wise woman." He leaned back against the counter, deliberately casual. "I'm here because you've been in my castle for 3 weeks and I still don't know who rejected you or why you came here instead of dying quietly in a ditch somewhere. Most rejected Omegas do." Her hands stilled. When she spoke, her voice was very quiet. "His name was Theron Blackwater, Alpha of the Frostclaw Pack. My mate." She spat the word like a curse. Or he was supposed to be. "The bond snapped into place when I turned 18, and for exactly 6 months I thought I'd found something real." "What happened?" His actual mate showed up. A beta from the Northern Territories. Beautiful, well-connected, politically useful. Aloan's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. Turns out the mate bond can be flexible if you're alpha enough and desperate enough and don't particularly care about the Omega whose heart you're ripping out. Garrick went very still. "He rejected you for someone else. He rejected me because I was inconvenient. Because Omegas don't have political value. Because I was the baker's daughter and she was a warlord's niece." She shaped the dough with vicious precision. He didn't even have the decency to do it cleanly. He drew it out. "Made me beg. Made sure everyone in the pack watched as he severed the bond and threw me out like garbage." The wolf in Garrick's chest snarled with pure rage. Bond rejection was one thing, painful but sometimes necessary. Public humiliation and torture was another entirely. "And you came here." "I came here," she agreed, "because I had nowhere else to go. Because every other pack would either kill me or sell me to the conscription camps. Because I heard the Alpha King doesn't keep Omegas." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were blazing. "I thought I'd be safe." "You're safe." "Am I?" She gestured around the kitchen. "Or am I just another pet project? Something broken for you to fix until you get bored?" Garrick stood slowly, moving toward her with the kind of careful deliberation usually reserved for approaching wounded animals. "You're not broken," he said quietly. "You're angry. There's a difference. I held a knife to your throat 6 days ago in a garden. Most kings would have me executed. Most kings are tedious." He reached past her, she flinched but didn't move, and tore off a piece of her bread dough. Popped it in his mouth. "This is good, by the way. You were right about Meredith overworking it." Aloan stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're eating raw dough. I like to live dangerously. Also, it's delicious." He grinned at her expression. "Aloan Frostclaw, you are under the protection of the crown. That means you're safe, you're fed, and you're free to hold as many knives to my throat as you feel the therapeutic need to, within reason." "Why?" The word came out strangled. "Why would you do that?" Because his wolf had taken one look at her and decided she was his to protect. Because the rage in her eyes reminded him of his own reflection 7 years ago. Because something about her defiance made him feel alive for the first time since Celine died. Because he was apparently a masochist with a death wish and terrible survival instincts. Because Garrick said instead, someone needs to teach Meredith proper bread technique, and you seem uniquely qualified. Considered a job offer. A job offer. Head royal baker. Comes with room, board, and the satisfaction of knowing you're preventing the castle from being subjected to Meredith's bread bricks. He held out his hand, solemn as any treaty negotiation. What do you say? Eloin looked at his hand like it might bite her. Then, slowly, she wiped the flour from her palm and took it. Her skin was warm, calloused, strong. His wolf purred. Absolutely not. Garrick told it again, even as his thumb brushed across her knuckles in a gesture that was entirely too familiar. Fine, Eloin said, pulling her hand back quickly. But I have conditions. Of course you do. I want access to the royal library. I want to be paid fairly, actual coin, not room and board. And she hesitated. I want to know about the conscription law. The one that's forcing Omegas into labor camps. Garrick's expression shuddered. That's not a simple topic. Nothing ever is. Her chin lifted. But if I'm going to live here, I want to understand the world I'm living in. Even the ugly parts. He studied her for a long moment, this fierce, broken, impossibly brave woman who'd crawled through hell to reach his throne and now wanted to know about policy law, like she had any right to care. Fine, he said. But not tonight. Tonight, finish your bread. Tomorrow, we'll talk politics. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him at the door. Your Majesty? Garrick, he corrected. If you're going to hold knives to my throat and argue with my cook, we're past titles. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Garrick, then. Thank you. He should have said something dismissive. Something distant. Something that would remind them both that he was the Alpha King and she was a rejected Omega under his protection and nothing more. Instead, he said, You're welcome, Eloin. And for what it's worth, Theron Blackwater is an idiot. He left before he could see her blush. Outside the kitchen, Marcus was waiting with his arms crossed and an expression of profound concern. Don't, Garrick warned. I didn't say anything. You were thinking very loudly. I'm your beta. It's my job to think loudly when you're being phenomenally stupid. Marcus fell into step beside him. You know what she is. A talented baker with anger management issues? Your mate, you absolute disaster of a wolf. Garrick stopped walking. In the silence, he could hear the distant clatter of the kitchen, the whisper of snow against windows, the steady beat of his own treacherous heart. No, he said flatly. Garrick. No. He turned to face Marcus, and there must have been something dangerous in his expression because his beta actually took a step back. I don't have a mate. I don't get a mate. The curse doesn't care about bonds or destiny or any of that romantic nonsense. It just kills. And I can't do that again. What if you're wrong? What if she's different? They're never different, Marcus. The curse doesn't discriminate. He resumed walking, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Eloin is under my protection. Nothing more. And when the blood moon rises in 3 months? Garrick didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew what would happen if he let himself feel anything more than professional concern for the furious Omega baking bread in his kitchen. They both knew the curse always collected its due. And they both knew that despite every logical reason to keep his distance, Garrick's heart was already starting to forget why loving her would be the cruelest thing he could possibly do. Chapter 2. The Politics of Survival. The conscription law, as it turned out, was exactly as terrible as Eloin had suspected. She sat in Garrick's private study 3 days later, reading through documents that made her blood boil and her hands shake with rage. Around her, the room was warm and book-lined, smelling of leather and pine and that particular scent that she was learning belonged to the Alpha King himself, winter storms and dark cedar. She refused to acknowledge how much she'd started to notice that scent. This is barbaric, she said, not looking up from the decree in her hands. You're forcing unmated Omegas into labor camps for the good of the kingdom. making them work manufacturing, agriculture, textile production, essentially slavery with a prettier name. Garrick, who was supposedly reviewing border reports at his desk, made a non-committal sound. Are you even listening to me? Every furious word. He finally looked up, and there was something tired in his eyes. And you're right. It is barbaric. It's also necessary. Necessary. Elowen surged to her feet, the decree crumpling in her fist. How is enslaving your own people necessary? Because the kingdom was dying. Garrick rose as well, moving around his desk with that predatory grace that reminded her exactly how dangerous he could be when he chose. When I took the throne, we were on the brink of collapse. The rebellion in the south had destroyed half our agricultural infrastructure. We had food shortages, economic collapse, and 3 packs on the verge of civil war. I had to make choices, hard choices, to keep people from starving. So you chose to sacrifice omegas. I chose to utilize unmated omegas in essential industries because they were the only available workforce that wasn't already committed to pack defense or reconstruction. His jaw tightened. And before you paint me as some kind of monster, know that they're paid, they're protected, and they're released after 3 years of service. Protected? Elowen laughed bitterly. I've heard the stories, Garrick. Omegas going into those camps and coming out broken. If they come out at all, those are violations of the law. The law that you signed. She threw the decree at him. He caught it easily, his reflexes frustratingly perfect. You created a system that treats omegas like resources instead of people. Like we're just interchangeable parts in your kingdom's machine. Garrick's eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising to the surface. And what would you have had me do? Let thousands starve? Let the kingdom fracture into chaos? I made the choice that saved the most lives. By destroying others. Yes, the word came out like a confession. Like a wound. I destroyed some to save many. That's what kings do, Elowen. We make impossible choices and live with the consequences. The room fell silent except for the crackle of the fire. Elowen's heart was pounding, her breath coming quick and angry. She should back down. She should remember that she was a guest here, that he could throw her out with a word, that arguing with the Alpha King was possibly the stupidest thing she could do. Instead, she stepped closer. Then change it, she said quietly. You saved the kingdom. Fine. But the crisis is over, isn't it? The South is stable. The economy is recovering. You don't need the conscription law anymore. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. She was close enough now to see the silver threading through his dark hair, the faint scars on his jaw, the way his pupils dilated slightly when she moved into his space. You're the Alpha King. Your word is law. So change the law. And if I do, and the economy collapses again? If we can't maintain production levels? If people start starving because I was too soft? Then you find another solution. Elowen reached out without thinking and grabbed his hand. His skin was warm, calloused, radiating that alpha strength that should have terrified her but somehow didn't. You're supposed to be this brilliant, terrifying king. So be brilliant. Find a way to fix the system without sacrificing omegas. Garrick stared down at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what physical contact felt like. When he looked up, his eyes were pure gold, his wolf completely present. And if I can't? Then at least you tried. She squeezed his hand once, then let go, suddenly aware of how inappropriate she was being. That's all any of us can do, right? Try to be better than we were yesterday. For a long moment, Garrick didn't move. Then he did something Elowen hadn't expected. He laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound, more broken glass than music, but it was genuine. You're exhausting, he said, but there was something warm in his voice. Has anyone ever told you that? Frequently. Usually right before they throw me out. I'm not throwing you out. He moved back to his desk and pulled out fresh parchment. I'm putting you to work. If you're so convinced there's a better solution, help me find it. Elowen blinked. You're serious. Catastrophically so. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. We're going to review the conscription law line by line, identify the problems, and draft potential reforms. And Elowen, his smile was sharp enough to cut. I hope you weren't planning on sleeping tonight. She wasn't. They worked until dawn, fueled by coffee and stubborn determination and a growing sense that maybe, just maybe, they could actually fix this broken thing. Alowan quickly discovered that Garrick was a ruthlessly efficient king when he chose to be. He didn't make excuses or hide behind political nonsense. When she pointed out a clause that was being abused, he rewrote it. When she suggested better protections, he added them. When she called something inhumane, he listened. It was intoxicating. What about voluntary service? She suggested around 3 in the morning, her eyes burning with exhaustion. Instead of conscription, offer good wages and benefits to any Omega who wants to work in essential industries. Make it attractive enough that they choose it. Garrick looked up from his notes, considering. That would require a significant increase in the treasury allocation. You spend more on your military parades. Fair point. He made a note. What else? Education programs. Training. So Omegas have actual skills and options instead of just being funneled into camps. She leaned forward, warming to her subject. And protections, real ones. Independent oversight, regular inspections, criminal penalties for any administrator who abuses their position. You've thought about this. I've lived this, she corrected quietly. Or I would have if I hadn't ended up here. Every Omega thinks about it, Garrick. We all know that rejection or losing our pack means conscription. It's the sword hanging over all of us. His expression darkened. I never intended. I know. And surprisingly, she did. She'd watched him work tonight, seen the way he genuinely agonized over every decision, every trade-off. This wasn't a cruel king enjoying his power. This was a man trying to hold together a kingdom with his bare hands and not quite managing it. But intent doesn't matter as much as impact. And the impact has been bad. Bad, he repeated dryly. Such a diplomatic word. I'm a baker, not a politician. I don't do diplomatic. She stretched, her spine cracking in 3 places. But I do know that if you implement even half of these reforms, you'll save lives. Real lives. Omegas who won't have to live in fear. Garrick was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents spread across his desk. Then he looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. Why do you care so much? He asked. You're safe now. You could just exist here. Bake your bread. Stay out of politics. Why risk making yourself a target by pushing for this? Alowan thought about her mother, who'd taught her that bread was an act of love. About the other Omegas in Frostclaw territory, the ones who'd looked at her with pity after Theron's rejection because they knew what came next. About the girl she'd been 6 months ago, who'd thought being someone's mate meant being safe. Because I can, she said simply. Because I got lucky, if you can call being publicly rejected and nearly dying lucky, and ended up here instead of in a camp. And if I have the Alpha King's ear, even temporarily, I'm going to use it to make things better for the Omegas who weren't lucky. You could have just asked me to change the law. Nicely. Yes, well. She grinned despite her exhaustion. Where's the fun in that? Besides, holding a knife to your throat really opened up the lines of communication. A bold negotiation strategy. I'll recommend it to my diplomatic corps. Please don't. Marcus already looks like he's one stress-induced catastrophe away from early retirement. They both laughed, real laughter this time, the kind that comes from exhaustion and absurdity and the strange intimacy of working through the night together. When they finally finished, the sun was rising over the snow-covered mountains, painting everything gold and pink. We should present this to the council, Garrick said, stacking the documents with careful precision. They'll resist. They always do. But if we're strategic about it, they'll accept it because you're the Alpha King and they don't have a choice. That's not how I prefer to govern. No, Alowan agreed, studying him in the dawn light. You prefer to carry the entire kingdom on your shoulders and pretend you're not suffocating under the weight. Very heroic. Also very stupid. I'm not, he paused. You know what? I'm too tired to argue. Yes, I'm stupid. Happy? Ecstatic. She stood, her legs protesting after hours of sitting. I should go. Let you get some sleep. Alowan. His voice stopped her at the door. Thank you. For pushing. For caring. For being aggressively, inconveniently involved in things that don't concern you. Everything concerns me, she said. That's the problem with surviving something terrible. It makes you want to prevent it from happening to anyone else. She left before he could respond, before she could acknowledge the way his eyes had softened when he looked at her, before she could admit that somewhere between holding a knife to his throat and reforming his kingdom's laws, she'd started to actually like Garrick Fenler. Which was dangerous. Because she'd already had one alpha destroy her heart, and she'd sworn never to give anyone that power again. Even if this particular alpha had eyes like winter storms and smiled at her like she was something precious instead of broken. Especially then. Marcus found Garrick still in his study an hour later, staring at the stack of reforms like they might spontaneously combust. You're going to do it, the beta said. It wasn't a question. Yes. The council will lose their minds. Let them. Garrick leaned back in his chair, exhaustion pulling at him like an undertow. She's right. The law was always meant to be temporary. It's time to end it. Because it's the right thing to do, or because the Omega with trust issues and a talent for bread-based terrorism asked you to? Garrick shot him a dark look. Both. Neither. Does it matter? It matters, Marcus said carefully, because you're falling for her. And, before you tell me I'm wrong, I've known you for 15 years. I know what you look like when you're interested in someone. And this is different from anything I've seen since Celine. I'm not falling for her. You spent all night rewriting policy law because she asked you to. I spent all night rewriting policy law because it was bad policy. You memorized her schedule. You coincidentally walk past the kitchens whenever she's baking. Yesterday, you sent Marcus to research Frostclaw Pack politics because you wanted to know more about her background. The beta's expression softened. Garrick, you're falling for her. And with the blood moon coming. I know. Garrick's hands clenched on the armrests. I know, Marcus. Which is why it doesn't matter what I feel. It's not going to happen. And if she feels the same way, then we'll both have to live with disappointment. He stood abruptly, needing to move, to pace, to do anything but sit still with this conversation. The curse doesn't care about feelings or fate or whether someone deserves happiness. It just kills. And I can't do that to her. So you're just going to suffer in noble silence? If that's what it takes. He moved to the window, looking out at the castle grounds where Aloan was probably sleeping, exhausted from their night of policy reform and careful. Not quite flirting. She deserves better than me anyway. Better than someone who comes with a death sentence attached. Marcus sighed. You're an idiot. So I've been told. Apparently it's one of my more endearing qualities. That's not what Aloan said. She called you brilliant. Garrick's heart did something complicated and entirely inappropriate. She was being sarcastic. She really wasn't. Marcus moved to stand beside him at the window. Look, I know the curse is real. I know what happened to Celine. But Aloan is different. They're all different until they're dead. And maybe, Marcus continued, undeterred, maybe it's worth the risk. Maybe loving someone, really loving them, is worth the chance that it might end badly. Because the alternative is this. He gestured around the study at the life Garrick had built out of duty and isolation. Living but not really alive. Surviving but never actually happy. Happiness is overrated. Says the man who's smiled more in the last 3 weeks than he has in 7 years. Garrick closed his eyes. Go away, Marcus. Going. But for what it's worth. I think you should tell her. About the curse, about how you feel, about all of it. Let her make the choice. And if she chooses me and dies for it, then at least she dies having been chosen. Instead of dying alone and rejected like she almost did 3 weeks ago. Marcus headed for the door, then paused. Think about it. That's all I'm saying. Think about what kind of life you're offering her versus what kind she might want. And remember, sometimes the cruelest thing isn't loving someone. It's refusing to let them love you back. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Garrick stood at the window for a long time, watching the sun rise higher, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. In the distance, he could see smoke rising from the kitchen chimneys. Aloan would be awake soon, starting the day's bread, filling the castle with that cinnamon ansno scent that had become as familiar as breathing. His wolf purred at the thought. His heart ached with longing. and the blood moon crept closer with every passing day, patient and inevitable as death itself. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. The reforms passed the council with surprisingly little resistance, mostly because Garrick made it very clear that he wasn't asking for permission. Within 2 weeks, the conscription law was effectively dismantled. The labor camps were converted to voluntary work programs with actual wages and protections. Independent oversight committees were established. Every Omega currently in service was given the option to leave or stay under the new terms. It was, by any measure, a massive victory. Eloan should have been celebrating. Instead, she was in the training yard at dawn, beating the absolute hell out of a practice dummy. "Your form is terrible," a voice observed from behind her. She spun, breathing hard, to find Garrick leaning against the yard's entrance with his arms crossed and an expression of vague amusement. "I'm not a warrior," she said, turning back to assault the dummy with renewed vigor. "I'm a baker with anger issues. I can see that. You're going to dislocate your shoulder if you keep punching like that." He moved closer, his footsteps crunching in the snow. "Here, let me show you." Before she could protest, he was behind her, his hands guiding her arms into the proper position. His chest pressed against her back, warm and solid, and suddenly Eloan couldn't remember why she'd been angry or what she'd been hitting or even her own name. "Feet shoulder width apart," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Good. Now when you punch, rotate from the hips. Use your whole body, not just your arm. Feel that." She felt everything. The heat of him. The strength in his hands. The way his wolf purred just beneath his skin, calling to something wild and wanting in her own soul. This was bad. This was very, very bad. "Why are you out here?" Garrick asked, still holding her in that almost embrace. "It's barely dawn. Couldn't sleep." She pulled away, needing distance, needing air. "Too much in my head. Want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." She hit the dummy again, better form this time, she noted with grim satisfaction. "It's just everything. The reforms passed, which is good. Great, even. But now I keep thinking about all the Omegas who suffered under the old law. All the ones who died or were broken or just disappeared. And I can't stop wondering if it was enough. If any of it was enough." "Survivor's guilt," Garrick said quietly. "You're wondering why you got out when others didn't. How very insightful of you. I'm a king. Guilt is my native language." He picked up a practice sword, testing its weight. "Want to try something more productive than destroying that dummy? Are you challenging me to a duel?" "I'm offering you a healthier outlet for rage than punching inanimate objects." His smile was sharp. "Unless you're scared." That did it. 20 minutes later, Eloan was on her back in the snow for the third time, staring up at the pale morning sky and seriously reconsidering her life choices. "You're letting your guard down," Garrick said, offering her a hand up. "You telegraph every move." "I'm a baker," she reminded him, accepting his help and immediately regretting it when he pulled her a bit too close. "Not a warrior. You held a knife to my throat with reasonable confidence. That was desperation, not skill. Desperation is a skill." He released her hand but didn't step back. "It's kept me alive more times than training ever has." They were too close. Too warm. The yard was empty except for them, the rest of the castle still sleeping, and suddenly Eloan was very aware that they were alone in the pre-dawn darkness, with nothing but snow and silence around them. "Garrick," she said carefully. "Why are you really here?" "Training." "You don't need training. You're already terrifying." "I'm here," he said quietly, "because I couldn't sleep either. Because I was standing at my window and I saw you come out here. Because apparently I'm incapable of making good decisions where you're concerned." Her heart stuttered. "That's not, we shouldn't." "I know." He raised his hand like he might touch her face, then dropped it. "Believe me, I know. But knowing something and being able to act on it are different things." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you're under my protection. That you've become." He paused, searching for words. "Important. To the kingdom. The reforms wouldn't have happened without you." It was the right thing to say. The safe thing. The lie that would keep them both at arm's length. But Eloan had been rejected by one alpha who couldn't tell her the truth. She wouldn't accept pretty lies from another. That's not what you meant, she said. No. He met her eyes, and there was something raw and desperate there. It's not. But it's what I'm going to say anyway. Because the truth is dangerous, Aloan. For both of us. Dangerous how? In ways I can't explain. In ways that end badly. He stepped back, putting physical distance between them even as something invisible and electric still pulled them together. I need you to trust me on this. Whatever is happening between us, it can't. It won't. Anger flared hot and bright in her chest. You don't get to decide that. I'm the Alpha King. I decide everything. Except this. She moved forward, closing the distance he created. You don't get to decide what I feel or what I want or what I'm willing to risk. I already had one alpha control my life and break my heart. I won't give you that power. I'm trying to protect you. From what? She was shouting now, all her fear and frustration and confused feelings boiling over. From yourself? From feelings? From the possibility that something good might actually happen? I've been rejected, Garrick. I've had my heart torn out. And I'm still here. I'm still fighting. So don't you dare try to protect me from living. Garrick looked at her like she'd stabbed him, like her words had found every vulnerable place and pressed down hard. You don't understand, he said hoarsely. Then make me understand. Tell me the truth instead of hiding behind noble intentions and cryptic warnings. For a moment, she thought he might actually do it. Thought he might explain whatever was haunting those winter storm eyes and keeping him locked in this self-imposed isolation. Then his expression shuddered. No, he said. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. He turned away from her. Go back to the castle, Aloan. Get some sleep. Forget this conversation happened. Forget it? She laughed bitterly. How? How do I forget that you just admitted there's something between us, and then immediately refused to do anything about it? How do I forget that you're either the most noble or the most cowardly alpha I've ever met? He flinched like she'd hit him. Good. She wanted him to hurt the way she was hurting, the way confusion and rejection and stupid, impossible hope were all tangling together in her chest like thorns. I'm trying to keep you alive, he said, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. I'm already alive. Maybe try letting me actually live. She left before he could respond, before she could see if her words landed or bounced off that impenetrable armor he wore like a second skin. Behind her, she heard nothing. No footsteps following. No voice calling her back. Just silence and snow and the growing certainty that she was falling for someone who had already decided they couldn't fall back. The next 2 weeks were professionally cordial and personally excruciating. Garrick treated her with perfect politeness, acknowledging her in hallways, thanking her for the bread, consulting her on the final details of the reform implementation. He was everything a good king should be, respectful, fair, distantly kind. He also avoided her like she carried the plague. No more late-night policy sessions. No more coincidental meetings in the kitchen. No more dawn training sessions or quiet conversations in his study. Just distance. Careful, deliberate, absolute distance. It was driving Aloan slowly insane. He's being an idiot, she told Marcus one afternoon, ambushing the beta in the library where he'd been innocently trying to do actual work. Marcus looked up from his reports with the expression of someone who'd known this conversation was inevitable and had been dreading it anyway. I can neither confirm nor deny that statement without violating several clauses of my employment contract. He admitted there was something between us. Then he immediately shut it down. What is he so afraid of? That's not my story to tell. Then whose story is it? Because from where I'm standing, I'm tired of alphas making decisions about my life without actually consulting me. She sank into the chair across from him, exhaustion pulling at her bones. I'm not asking you to betray him, Marcus. I'm asking you to help me understand. Because right now, all I know is that there's something broken in him, and he won't let anyone close enough to help fix it. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with loyalty and concern and the fact that Aloan looked about 3 seconds away from either crying or committing violence. What do you know about the blood moon? He finally asked. It rises once a year. It's considered sacred by some pacts. Why? The next blood moon is in 3 weeks. Something cold settled in Aloan's stomach. And that's all I can tell you. If you want to know more, if you really want to understand, you need to ask him. Or, he hesitated. There's an old woman in the East Village. Magda. She worked in the castle when the previous king was alive. She knows things. History that most people have forgotten. Why would she talk to me? Because she's the one who told Garrick about the curse in the first place. And because she's been waiting 7 years for him to actually do something about it instead of just accepting his fate like a martyr. Marcus held her gaze. But Aloan, if you go down this path, you need to be prepared for what you might find. Some truths are heavier than others. I've survived rejection and near death, she said. I can survive the truth. Can you? He looked at her with something like pity. Because the truth might be that there is no happy ending here. That some curses can't be broken. That loving him might literally kill you. Aloan's breath caught. What? Go talk to Magda, Marcus said quietly. Then decide if you really want to fight for this. Or if it's kinder to let him push you away. She left the library with her heart pounding and her mind racing. A curse. The blood moon. Loving him might literally kill you. She should let it go. She should accept Garrick's distance as the mercy it was probably meant to be. She should protect herself the way no one else seemed willing to. Instead, she found herself walking toward the East Village as the sun set and the temperature dropped, and something that felt horribly like fate pulled her forward. Because apparently, surviving one heartbreak had taught her absolutely nothing about self-preservation. Chapter 4. The Truth in Blood. Magda's cottage sat at the edge of the East Village like a crooked tooth, smoke rising from its chimney in lazy spirals. Aloan stood outside for a full 5 minutes, trying to convince herself that this was a terrible idea. Then she knocked. Finally, a voice called from inside. Was wondering how long you'd stand out there freezing like a nervous rabbit. Come in, girl. And shut the door, you're letting out the heat. The cottage's interior was exactly what Aloan expected from a woman who knew about curses. Dried herbs hanging from the rafters, shelves lined with jars of questionable contents, and a fire burning so hot it felt like stepping into summer. Magda herself was small and ancient, with eyes that saw too much and hands that moved with the kind of precision that came from a lifetime of precision work. You're the Omega, she said, not looking up from the tea she was preparing. The one who held a knife to the king's throat and lived to tell about it. Brave or stupid, haven't decided which yet. Both, probably. Aloan accepted the offered tea, even though it smelled like dirt and regret. Marcus said you could tell me about the blood moon. About the curse. Marcus has a big mouth. But Magda's expression softened slightly. Though I suppose it's time someone did. The boy's been carrying it alone for too long. Tell me. Magda settled into her chair with the careful movements of someone whose bones ached. 3 generations ago, the Fenler line had an alpha named Brennan. Powerful. Arrogant. Cruel when it suited him. He took a witch as his mistress, Moira Ashthorne, and promised her the world. She believed him. Let me guess, Aloan said dryly. He lied. He got bored. Found someone new. Rejected Moira publicly, viciously, the way powerful men do when they want to erase their mistakes. The old woman's expression darkened. But Moira was no ordinary witch. She was a blood weaver, one of the old magic users who could tie spells to lineages, to hearts, to the very soul of a family line. And she was furious. Aloan's hands tightened on her teacup. What did she do? She wove a curse into the Fenler bloodline. Simple. Absolute. Unbreakable. Magda looked at her with those 2 knowing eyes. Any woman the Alpha King loves will die under the blood moon. Not might die. Will. The curse doesn't care about intentions or worthiness, or whether someone deserves happiness. It just kills. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Garrick's father, Aloan managed. Did he? Never fell in love. He was smart enough to keep his distance, to take lovers, but never let anyone close enough to trigger the curse. He died of natural causes, well, natural for an alpha who fought too many battles and made too many enemies. Magda poured more tea. But Garrick. Garrick was young. Idealistic. He thought love was possible. Thought maybe the curse was just a story. Celine, Aloan whispered. Celine. Magda's expression filled with old grief. Sweet girl. Kind. She and Garrick were happy for exactly 6 weeks. Then the blood moon rose, and she died in his arms with no explanation except the one we'd been warning him about since childhood. Eloin felt sick. And there's no way to break it? Bloodweaver curses are nearly impossible to undo. They're tied to the essence of the line itself. You'd have to unravel the magic at its source, which would require either Mora herself or another bloodweaver of equal power. Magda shook her head. And Mora died decades ago. The knowledge died with her. So he just, what? Lives alone forever? Denies himself any chance at happiness because of something his ancestor did? Better than loving someone and watching them die. The old woman's voice was surprisingly gentle. You're angry at him. I can see it. But try to understand he's not pushing you away because he doesn't care. He's pushing you away because he cares too much. Because he's already lost one woman to the curse, and he won't risk losing another. And if I'm willing to risk it, then you're a fool. Magda set down her teacup with a decisive clink. The curse doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about true love or willingness, or any of that romantic nonsense. You fall in love with Garrick Fenler and you die. Simple as that. Eloin stood abruptly, needing to move, to pace, to do anything but sit still with this information burning through her veins like poison. There has to be a way, she said. Some loophole. Some solution. Curses can be broken. There are stories. Stories aren't the same as reality, girl. And this curse has held for 3 generations. It's killed 2 women that we know of, and probably more that we don't. It's not going to suddenly break because you're stubborn. I'm more than stubborn. I'm desperate. Eloin turned to face her. And I've already been rejected once. I've already felt my heart break. I'm not going to let fear of death keep me from living. Not again. Even if living means dying? Especially then. She moved toward the door, her decision made even if it was probably the worst one she'd ever have. Thank you for the information. And the tea. Even if it tasted like punishment. Wait. Magda's voice stopped her. There might be one thing. It's not a solution. Not even close. But it's information. Eloin turned back. Mora had a grimoire, the old woman said carefully. A book where she recorded all her spells, her research, her curse work. It disappeared after her death, but there were rumors it ended up in the royal archives. If it still exists, if you could find it, it might contain information about the curse. How it was woven. What its exact parameters are. Maybe even a hint at how it could be undone. Where would I look? The restricted section. The one Garrick keeps locked and warded because it contains dangerous knowledge. Magda's smile was sharp. But you're clever. And you have access to the castle. I imagine you could find a way. It was the worst idea Eloin had heard since hold a knife to the Alpha King's throat. Naturally, she was absolutely going to do it. If I die doing this, you'll die either way, girl. The curse, the book, or just the passage of time. At least this way, you'll die having tried. Magda waved her toward the door. Now go. And tell the boy I said he's an idiot for thinking martyrdom is noble. It's not. It's just wasteful. Eloin left the cottage with her mind racing and her heart pounding and the growing certainty that she was about to do something either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Breaking into the restricted archives turned out to be easier than expected, mostly because Eloin had spent the last month making friends with the castle staff, and the night guard owed her a favor for that time she'd baked his daughter's birthday cake. I didn't see you, he said, very deliberately looking the other way. And if anyone asks, you were never here. You're a gentleman and a scholar. I'm an idiot who likes cake too much. Try not to get me fired. The restricted archives were exactly as foreboding as advertised, dusty, dark, and smelling like old secrets. Eloin lit a lamp and started searching, looking for anything labeled Ash Thorn, or curses, or please don't read this if you value your life. She found it 3 hours later, hidden behind a false panel in a shelf marked Agricultural Records, year 487. Because apparently, evil witches had a sense of humor. The grimoire was bound in black leather and covered in symbols that made Eloin's eyes water just looking at them. Opening it felt like breaking a seal, like crossing a threshold she wouldn't be able to uncross. She opened it anyway. The writing inside was cramped and furious, the hand of someone who'd been brilliant and bitter and absolutely certain of her power. Page after page of spells and curses and magical theory that Aloan only half understood. Then she found it. The Fenler Curse. Woven on the blood moon following Brennan Fenler's rejection. Parameters. Any woman the Alpha King loves will die when the blood moon rises. Definition of love: genuine emotional attachment exceeding mere physical attraction or political alliance. The curse recognizes soul-deep connection and punishes it accordingly. Theoretical breaking conditions. The curse could be broken if the Fenler line ended, impractical and undesirable, if another bloodweaver of equal power performed a counterspell, unlikely given the rarity of such magic, or if the next line had been scratched out violently. Like Mora had written something and then immediately regretted it. Aloan held the page up to the lamp, squinting at the obscured text. Or if the cursed Alpha willingly sacrificed himself under the blood moon to break the pattern. A life for a life. His death would satisfy the curse's demand for blood and release the line from its hold. Aloan's blood ran cold. Garrick had read this. He knew. He knew there was a way to break the curse, and it required his death. And he'd apparently decided that dying alone was better than taking that option. Absolutely not, she said aloud to the empty archives. Absolutely the hell not. She kept reading, desperately searching for another option, another solution, anything that didn't end with Garrick dead and her alone. There was nothing. Just Mora's bitter notes about how the Fenler line deserved to suffer, how Brennan had destroyed her heart and she would destroy his legacy, how love itself would become a weapon turned against them. Aloan slammed the book shut and immediately regretted it. The sound echoed through the archives like a gunshot. Footsteps. Coming closer. She shoved the grimoire back into its hiding place and blew out her lamp just as the archive doors opened and torchlight spilled in. I know you're here, Garrick's voice said, quiet and tired and absolutely certain. Come out. Aloan stepped into the light, caught and furious and entirely unrepentant. How long have you known? She demanded. He looked at her for a long moment, taking in her disheveled appearance, the dust on her clothes, the fury in her eyes. About the grimoire? Or about you breaking into restricted archives? About the sacrifice? About the way to break the curse? His expression didn't change. Since the beginning. Since Celine died and I read every damn book in this castle looking for a way to fix what I'd broken. And you didn't, you weren't going to, she couldn't even finish the sentence. You were just going to let the curse stand. Let yourself be alone forever. Let every woman you might ever care about die. Because the alternative was your own death. Yes, you're an idiot. So I've been told. He moved closer, and there was something broken in his eyes. What did you expect me to do, Aloan? Kill myself on the chance it might work? Orphan my kingdom on a theory written by a bitter witch who wanted us to suffer. I expected you to tell me. To give me the choice instead of making it for me. The choice was mine to make. It's my curse. My bloodline. My responsibility. And what about me? The words came out raw. What about what I want? What I'm willing to risk? You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She closed the distance between them, close enough to see the silver threading his dark hair, the exhaustion bruising his eyes. I know you're falling for me. I know I'm falling for you. I know the blood moon rises in 2 weeks, and if we don't do something, one of us is going to die, either me from the curse, or you from whatever stupid noble sacrifice you're planning. I'm not planning. Don't lie to me. Not now. Not about this. Her voice broke. I've had one alpha lie to me and break my heart. I won't survive it from another. So tell me the truth, Garrick. Tell me what you're planning. He looked at her like she was something precious and impossible. Like he was memorizing her face for the long, lonely years ahead. I'm planning, he said quietly, to push you away. To make you hate me if I have to. To ensure that whatever we feel never becomes love. Because as long as it's just attraction, just potential, the curse can't touch you. That's the stupidest plan I've ever heard. It's the only plan that keeps you alive. And what about you? She reached up, cupping his face with shaking hands. What about your life? Your happiness? Do those just not matter? Not compared to yours. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man dying of thirst finally reaching water. I've been alone for 7 years, alone. I can be alone for 7 more. For 70 more. For however long it takes. But I can't watch you die. I won't survive it twice. Eloan felt tears burning her eyes, tears of fury and frustration, and the horrible, wonderful realization that he loved her. He loved her enough to break his own heart to keep her safe. And she loved him enough to refuse to let him. Then we find another way, she said fiercely. We research every book, consult every witch, explore every option that doesn't end with one of us dead. We have 2 weeks. That's enough time. Eloan. No. She pulled his face down to hers, their foreheads touching, their breath mingling in the cold archive air. No more noble sacrifices. No more suffering alone. We fight this together. Or we don't fight it at all. For a long moment, Garrick didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stood there with his eyes closed and her hands on his face and something breaking open in his chest. Then he kissed her. It was desperate and gentle and tasted like hope and doom all tangled together. His hands came up to frame her face, his wolf purring so loudly she could feel it in her bones, and for one perfect moment, the curse didn't matter and the blood moon didn't matter and nothing existed except the 2 of them finally admitting what they'd both known for weeks. They were doomed. And they were going to fight anyway. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Garrick rested his forehead against hers. 2 weeks, he agreed roughly. We try everything. And if we can't find a solution, we will. But if we can't, he continued, you let me push you away. You let me keep you safe. Promise me. Eloan thought about lying, about promising something she had no intention of keeping. Instead, she said, I promise to do what I think is right. Even if you disagree with it. That's not what I asked for. It's what you're getting. She kissed him again, quick and fierce. Now come on. We have research to do and a curse to break. And we're wasting time standing here when we could be saving your stupid, self-sacrificing life. Despite everything, the curse, the deadline, the impossible odds, Garrick laughed. You're going to be the death of me, he said. Not if I have anything to say about it. Eloan grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the archives. Now, let's go find a way to break this curse. And if we can't find one, we'll make one. Because I didn't survive rejection and near death and your terrible flirting just to lose you to some witch's grudge. They spent the night reading, researching, desperately searching for a solution that didn't exist. But they did it together. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 5, Blood Moon Rising. The blood moon rose in exactly 12 days. In that time, Garrick and Eloan consulted every expert, read every book, and contacted every witch, mage, and questionable hedge wizard they could find. The answer was always the same. Blood weaver curses cannot be broken by conventional means. The only solutions are the death of the cursed line or a willing sacrifice. On the 11th day, Eloan found Garrick in his study, staring at a map like it might contain answers. I found someone, she said without preamble. A witch in the northern mountains. Kira Thorweave. She's supposedly one of the last living blood weavers. Garrick looked up, and there was something fragile and desperate in his expression. And she says she might be able to help. For a price. What price? She won't say until we get there. But Garrick, she's 3 days ride away. And the blood moon rises in 12 days. Eloan moved closer, her voice urgent. We need to leave now. Today. We might not make it back in time, but it's our best chance. Or, Garrick said quietly, we stay here. We accept that some things can't be fixed. We protect you by ensuring this never becomes what the curse defines as love. It's already love, you idiot. Eloan grabbed his hands, pulling him up from his chair. It's been love since I held a knife to your throat and you offered me a job instead of an execution. Since you spent all night helping me reform laws that you created. Since you looked at me like I was something worth protecting instead of something broken. Eloan. We're going to the northern mountains. We're talking to this witch. And we're finding a way to break this curse. She held his gaze, fierce and unwavering. Because I love you. And I'm choosing you. And if that means the curse kills me, then at least I'll die having been loved back. That's more than most people get. Garrick closed his eyes like she'd wounded him. You're asking me to risk your life. I'm asking you to let me risk my own life for something I believe in. For someone I love. That's my choice to make. And if I can't live with that choice, then you'll learn to. Because I'm going north with or without you. And I'd really prefer it to be with. She stepped closer, close enough to rest her hand over his heart. Please, let me fight for this. For us. For the chance that maybe, just maybe, we can beat this thing. For a long moment, he said nothing. Just stood there with her hand on his chest and war raging in his eyes. Then he covered her hand with his own. 3 days there. 3 days back. That gives us 6 days before the blood moon if this doesn't work. His voice was rough. 6 days to say goodbye. 6 days to prepare for the sacrifice, you mean? She'd read his mind, seen the plan forming. You're going to kill yourself under the blood moon. Break the curse. Save me and every future woman who might love a Fenler King. If it comes to that. It won't. She pulled him toward the door. Because we're going to find another way. Now pack your things. We leave in an hour. And Garrick. She smiled despite everything. Try to remember that I'm the one who held a knife to your throat. If anyone's breaking curses and defying destiny, it's going to be me. The ride north was brutal. 3 days of harsh terrain, freezing temperatures, and the growing awareness that time was running out faster than they could ride. They barely spoke except to discuss logistics and routes. But at night, when they made camp and huddled around fires that never quite kept the cold at bay, Garrick would pull Aloan close, and she would let herself pretend this wasn't goodbye. On the 3rd day, they reached Kira Thornweave's tower. It sat on a mountain peak like a middle finger to gravity, accessible only by a narrow path that seemed designed to kill visitors before they could be annoying. The witch herself was younger than Aloan expected, maybe 40, with silver-threaded hair and eyes that saw straight through pretense into truth. The cursed king and his doomed lover, she said by way of greeting. How romantic. Also, how predictable. Do you know how many desperate alphas come to me thinking I can fix their problems? Can you? Garrick asked bluntly. Depends. Can you pay my price? Name it. Kira smiled, and it wasn't friendly. Not gold. Not power. Not any of the things kings usually offer. She looked at Aloan. Her. I want the Omega. A year of her life, freely given. 1 year in my service, learning the old magic, serving as my apprentice. That's my price for attempting to break your curse. Absolutely not, Garrick said immediately. But Aloan was already nodding. Done. Aloan. A year of my life for the rest of yours? She turned to him, and there was steel in her voice. That's not even a question. Yes. I accept. You don't know what you're agreeing to. I know exactly what I'm agreeing to. A year away from you. A year learning magic I don't understand. A year of servitude to a witch who probably doesn't tolerate nonsense. She looked back at Kira. But after that year, I'm free? And the curse is broken. If I can break it, yes. If I can't. Kira shrugged. You'll have spent a year learning useful magic before you die to a curse. Could be worse. That's not reassuring. I'm a witch, not a therapist. Now, do we have a deal or not? Because I'm busy and you're running out of time. Aloan held out her hand. Deal. Kira's grip was like iron. Then let's begin. What followed was 6 hours of the most intense magical examination Aloan had ever experienced. Kira studied the curse from every angle, its construction, its power source, its exact parameters. She had Garrick recite every detail of Celine's death and every word of Moira's grimoire. She made Aloan describe exactly what she felt when she looked at Garrick, then cross-referenced it with ancient definitions of love. Finally, as the sun set on their 6th day in the mountains and the blood moon prepared to rise the following night, Kira sat back with a thoughtful expression. Well, Garrick demanded. Can you break it? Yes and no. Kira drummed her fingers on her desk. The curse is brilliantly constructed. Moira was a master. But she was also human, which means she made one critical mistake. What mistake? She defined the parameters too specifically. The curse kills any woman the Alpha King loves. But love is subjective. And Mora defined it as a soul-deep connection that exceeds mere attraction or alliance. That's vague. Exploitable. Aloan leaned forward. Exploitable how? The curse responds to Garrick's recognition of his own love. If he believes he loves someone truly, deeply, soul-deep, the curse activates. But belief can be complicated. Kira's smile was sharp. What if I told you that you could love someone without believing you love them? What if I told you that the heart and the mind don't always agree? You're talking about mental barriers, Garrick said slowly. Psychological locks. I'm talking about redefining your own relationship with love. I can't break the curse. Its magic is too strong. But I can help you restructure your mind so that you experience love without triggering the curse's recognition parameters. She looked between them. You'll feel everything you feel now. But a part of your mind, the part the curse monitors, will remain locked. Convinced that what you feel is something else. Protection. Duty. Friendship. Anything but capital L love. That's insane, Aloan said. That's magic. And it's your only option besides death or eternal loneliness. Kira crossed her arms. I can create the mental architecture, but you have to maintain it. Any slip, any moment where you fully acknowledge what you feel, and the curse activates. It's like walking a tightrope over fire. Forever. Garrick was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, what about children? Heirs? If I take a lover, if I have a child, does the curse extend to them? Children of the Alpha King are subject to the curse only if they inherit the title. Otherwise, they're free. Kira's expression softened slightly. And as for lovers, the curse doesn't care about sex or companionship. Only love. You can have all the relationships you want, as long as you never let yourself believe it's love. That's not living, Aloan said. That's just existing with extra steps. It's surviving, Kira corrected. Which is more than most cursed alphas manage. Now, do you want my help or not? Because the blood moon rises tomorrow night, and if you're not back at your castle by then, the curse kills her regardless of whether you've accepted my help. They looked at each other. These two people who'd found love in the worst possible circumstances. We can't make it back in time, Garrick said quietly. 3 days ride. We have 1 day. Then we need another solution. Aloan's mind raced. What if we separate? If I'm not near him when the blood moon rises, does the curse still activate? Proximity doesn't matter. Only his acknowledgement of love. If he loves you, if he believes he loves you, when the moon rises, you die. Distance is irrelevant. Then we accept your help, Garrick said decisively. We implement the mental barriers. We survive. For a year while I serve as Kira's apprentice, Aloan added. And after that year, you maintain those barriers forever. Or until we find a real way to break the curse. Or until you die of old age having lived a half-life of denied feelings, Kira said cheerfully. But sure, let's go with your version. It's more optimistic. I hate you, Aloan told her. Everyone does eventually. Part of my charm. Kira stood. Now sit. Both of you. This is going to hurt, and we don't have time for me to be gentle. The spell took 4 hours and felt like having her mind disassembled and reassembled in a new configuration. When it was over, Aloan looked at Garrick and felt everything. All the love and longing and desperate hope. But underneath it was a new structure. A barrier. A voice that whispered, this isn't love, this is protection, this is duty, this is anything but the thing the curse is watching for. Did it work? She asked. You tell me. Kira was watching them with clinical interest. How do you feel when you look at him? Like I want him safe. Like I want him happy. Like I would do anything to protect him. And would you call that love? Aloan opened her mouth to say yes, and found the words stuck in her throat. Not forbidden. Not impossible. Just inaccurate. Like calling the ocean a puddle. The feeling was too big, too complicated, too many things at once to be reduced to a single 4-letter word. No, she heard herself say, and felt the truth of it even as her heart screamed the opposite. It's not love. It's something else. Something more. Kira nodded, satisfied. The curse will accept that definition. Mostly. You'll need to maintain that belief structure, both of you. No moments of weakness. No romantic declarations. No letting yourself think I love you even in your own head. The curse is always watching. And the blood moon? Garrick asked. Rises tomorrow night. And when it does, the curse will check if you love anyone. It will find your mental barriers and accept them as truth. Kira's expression was grim. Probably. 70% chance of success. Those aren't great odds. They're better than the 100% chance of death you had before you came here. She gestured toward the door. Now go. Start writing. Even if you don't make it back to the castle in time, you should at least try to die in a place that matters to you. They left immediately, racing the sun and the moon and the curse that had defined Garrick's life for too long. They didn't make it home. The blood moon rose while they were still 2 days from the castle, camping in a clearing that smelled like pine and snow and the approaching doom of destiny. Eloan felt it the moment the moon crested the horizon, a pull in her chest, a whisper of power that said, here, this woman, this heart. The curse was checking. She looked at Garrick, who'd gone very still, and realized he felt it too. The attention of ancient magic, examining them both like insects under glass. Do you love her? The curse seemed to ask. And Garrick, his mind structured by Kira's magic, answered with absolute certainty, no. I protect her. I value her. I would die for her. But love? No. This is something else entirely. The curse circled them like a predator, unsatisfied but unable to argue with the truth it was being fed. And you? It turned to Eloan. Do you love him? And Eloan, her heart screaming one answer while her mind provided another, thought very carefully, no. I trust him. I respect him. I would burn the world for him. But love? That's too small a word for what this is. The curse hesitated. It wanted to strike. Wanted to fulfill its purpose. Wanted to punish the Fenler line the way it had been designed to do. But it couldn't argue with truth. And their truth was complicated enough, structured carefully enough, that it didn't quite meet the curse's definition of love. After a moment that felt like eternity, the pressure lifted. The blood moon rose higher, red and ominous, and nothing happened. Eloan stayed alive. She looked at Garrick and saw tears streaming down his face. It worked, he whispered. Goddess, it actually worked. It worked, she agreed, and found herself crying too. We survived. They held each other as the blood moon reached its apex, neither of them quite believing they were still breathing. 1 year, Eloan said against his chest. I serve Kira for 1 year. And then we figure out the rest. 1 year, Garrick agreed. And then forever of this, loving you without being able to admit it. That's not love, Eloan corrected, feeling the mental barrier snap into place even as her heart ached with the lie. Remember? It's something else. Something the curse can't touch. He laughed wetly. Something else. Right. But it's ours, she added fiercely. The curse can monitor us. It can watch. But it can't take this. Whatever this is. Whatever it is, Garrick agreed. It's ours. They stayed like that until the blood moon set and the dawn broke over the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and rose. They'd survived. It wasn't a happy ending, not really. 1 year apart, then a lifetime of careful denials and structured feelings and never quite admitting the truth. But it was survival. It was hope. It was the chance to be together in whatever complicated way they could manage. And sometimes, that was enough. Epilogue, 1 year later. Eloan returned to the castle on the first day of winter, her hair longer and her eyes older and her hands bearing calluses from a year of intensive magical training. Kira had been a brutal teacher. Demanding. Uncompromising. Absolutely determined to teach Eloan everything she knew about curse-breaking and bloodweaver magic and the strange space between life and death where power lived. You're not bad, the witch had said on Eloan's last day. For someone who started as a baker with anger issues. Your compliments are truly heartwarming. I'm not here to warm your heart. I'm here to teach you to break curses. Kira had handed her a leather-bound book, her own grimoire, decades of research and power. Keep studying. The mental barriers will hold, but they're not perfect. Eventually, you'll need a real solution. And if I can't find one, then you'll have a lifetime of loving someone while pretending you don't. Could be worse. Now, standing in the castle courtyard while snow fell around her, Aloin saw Garrick waiting. He looked older, tired, like the year had aged him in ways that had nothing to do with time. When he saw her, something in his expression broke open. "You came back," he said. "I promised I would." They met in the middle of the courtyard, not quite running but close. And when they embraced, it felt like coming home after a war, battered but victorious, scarred but alive. "I missed you," Garrick murmured against her hair. Which isn't love, obviously. Just profound attachment and emotional dependency. Obviously. Aloin laughed despite everything. "And I definitely don't love you. I just spent a year learning magic specifically to break your curse. Completely platonic. Entirely professional. Absolutely." They pulled back just enough to look at each other. Around them, the castle staff pretended very hard not to watch the Alpha King and his returned Omega having what was definitely not a romantic reunion. "So," Garrick said, "what now?" "Now we live." Aloin took his hand. "We govern. We make the kingdom better. We fight the curse every single day by refusing to let it win. And someday, maybe, we find a real way to break it. And if we don't, then we have this. Whatever this is." She squeezed his hand. "And this is more than I thought I'd ever have. So yes, it's enough." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It wasn't true love breaking all curses with a magical kiss. But it was real. Complicated. Hard one. And as Aloin Frostclaw and Garrick Fenler walked into the castle together, the rejected Omega and the cursed king, they both knew that sometimes survival was its own kind of victory. The blood moon would rise again next year. And the year after that. And every year for the rest of their lives. But they would face it together. Loving each other without admitting it. Fighting a curse by refusing its terms. Living in the space between acknowledgement and denial where hope still dared to exist. It wasn't perfect. But it was theirs. And that, in the end, was worth everything. The end. If you love this story, click on the subscribe button. By clicking on the subscribe button, you ensure you don't miss the next story. That might just be the one you've been waiting to hear.